This entry refers to a man named Yoshikazu Suzuki. This mystery remains as one of the most peculiar and tragic mysteries of the early 1990s. In November 1992, Suzuki attempted to cross the Pacific Ocean in a makeshift balloon contraption that caught the interest of many around the world, but ended in his mysterious disappearance. Not much is known about Yoshikazu Suzuki's early life and background, but it's said that he was passionate about adventure and exploration. Born in Japan, Suzuki developed an early interest in aviation and the idea of flight. This fascination grew over the years, fueled by stories of adventurers and explorers who dared to push the boundaries of what was considered possible. In comes cluster ballooning, a practice of attaching multiple helium balloons to a platform to achieve lift. Suzuki was likely inspired by earlier pioneers in this field such as Larry Walters, an American who famously flew a lawn chair attached to helium balloons in 1982. Walters' flight, though short and ending with a run-in with power lines, captured the public's imagination and demonstrated the potential and danger of cluster ballooning as a form of aerial adventure. Suzuki's preparation for his flight involved considerable time researching the principles of cluster ballooning and studying the successes and failures of those who had attempted similar projects. Suzuki designed a makeshift gondola that would act as his platform. This gondola was to be suspended by 23 large helium balloons, which he believed would provide sufficient lift and stability for the journey across the Pacific Ocean. Suzuki chose a high-quality helium balloons capable of withstanding the altitudes he intended to reach. These balloons were robust and specifically designed to maintain their integrity under varying atmospheric pressures. The gondola was crafted from lightweight, durable materials. It needed to be both strong enough to support Suzuki and his supplies and light enough to ensure the balloons could lift it effectively. While the exact details are unclear, it is known that Suzuki equipped himself with some basic navigational tools. This lack of advanced navigation aids would later prove to be a significant challenge during his flight. Before embarking on his journey, Suzuki conducted several tests to refine his setup and ensure everything functioned as expected. These tests covered the buoyancy of the balloons and the stability of the gondola, and even involved actual flights, albeit short ones, to observe the behavior of his creation in controlled conditions. As the date of departure approached, Suzuki made his final preparations. This phase included gathering essential supplies for the journey such as food, water, and possibly some basic survival equipment. He also needed to carefully monitor weather conditions to choose an optimal day for takeoff. Favorable weather was critical, as adverse conditions could easily jeopardize the success of his flight and his safety. On November 23, 1992, Yoshikazu Suzuki embarked on his journey from Lake Biwa in Japan. This initial phase of Suzuki's flight went according to plan, with the balloons lifting him gently into the air. Witnesses observed as he steadily climbed, heading towards his intended direction over the Pacific Ocean. It is said that you could make out a calm and confident demeanor on Suzuki's face as he lifted off. In the early hours of his flight, he seemed to have maintained control and navigated his craft without significant issues. As Suzuki continued his journey, the conditions began to shift. Approximately 800 kilometers offshore, the winds grew stronger and more unpredictable. Again, while the exact details of Suzuki's onboard equipment remain unclear, it is known that he faced limitations in his navigational and communication tools. This lack of advanced technology made it difficult for him to adjust his course or call for help as he drifted further away from the intended path. The Japanese Coast Guard tracked Suzuki's progress, providing occasional updates on his position. On November 25, 1992, a Coast Guard airplane spotted him at an altitude between 2,500 and 4,000 meters. This sighting was the last confirmed visual of Suzuki. Despite efforts to communicate with him and guide him back to safety, Suzuki eventually lost radio contact, leaving authorities with no further information on his whereabouts. Following the disappearance of Yoshikazu Suzuki on November 25th, an immediate and extensive search operation was launched. This involved both aerial and maritime strategies. The Japanese Coast Guard deployed several aircraft to conduct wide-ranging aerial searches over the area where Suzuki was last seen. These planes were equipped with advanced surveillance technology designed to scan large swaths of the ocean for any signs of Suzuki, his gondola, or the cluster of balloons that had carried him aloft. In parallel with the aerial searches, a significant number of maritime vessels were deployed. These included Coast Guard ships, fishing boats, and other available vessels that could assist in the search. The area where Suzuki was last seen was approximately 800 kilometers offshore, making the search radius incredibly large and difficult to manage. Additionally, the Pacific Ocean is known for its rapidly changing weather conditions, including storms and high winds, which can hinder visibility and make search operations dangerous. Eventually, the Japanese Coast Guard sought assistance from international maritime authorities as well. The search efforts were intense and sustained over several weeks. Despite the initial urgency and the deployment of significant resources, the vastness of the search area and the adverse conditions led to a gradual scaling down of operations. After several weeks of intensive searching, the likelihood of finding Suzuki alive diminished and the focus shifted toward locating any debris that could provide closure or insights into what happened. Ultimately, the search efforts failed to locate Yoshikazu Suzuki or any definitive evidence of his fate. No debris from his gondola or the helium balloons was found, leaving the mystery of his disappearance unresolved. While I did mention that weather played a significant factor, many proposed the idea that perhaps Suzuki's disappearance was primarily caused by technical failures instead, such as the balloons malfunctioning. A single balloon failure could cause a loss of buoyancy, leading to a rapid descent. If multiple balloons fail, it could result in an uncontrollable fall into the ocean. The age, material quality, and environmental exposure could all contribute to such a malfunction. Then there's the gondola. A structural failure, perhaps due to strong winds or a sudden jolt, could have compromised its stability and caused it to break apart mid-air or upon impact with the water. Others have added that maybe this incident was fueled by human error, meaning stuff like pilot fatigue, navigational mistakes, or hypoxia. The physical and mental demands of managing a cluster balloon flight over long distances can lead to severe fatigue. Prolonged exposure to high altitudes and the stress of navigating could impair Suzuki's judgment and reaction time, making it difficult to respond effectively to emergencies. As I mentioned, hypoxia is definitely a concern in this case since high altitudes have the potential to cause it. In case you don't know, hypoxia is a condition where the body is deprived of adequate oxygen supply. Symptoms include confusion, impaired decision-making, and loss of consciousness. If Suzuki did not have sufficient oxygen supplies or if he miscalculated his needs, hypoxia could have rendered him incapable of managing the flight or calling for help. Another theory suggests that Suzuki may have intentionally disappeared. Some speculate that Suzuki might have been driven by psychological factors, such as a desire to escape or an existential crisis. This theory, however, is largely speculative and lacks concrete evidence. The meticulous planning of his journey could indicate a deeper, undisclosed intention. If Suzuki had planned to disappear intentionally, he might have taken steps to ensure no trace was left behind. This theory, however, is countered by the fact that he publicized his journey and engaged with media, suggesting that he sought recognition for his feat. Despite the extensive search efforts and various theories, several questions about Suzuki's disappearance remain unresolved. What specifically caused the failure of Suzuki's craft? Was it a single catastrophic event or a combination of factors? Why was no debris ever found? Did the ocean currents carry everything away, or did the craft disintegrate in a way that left no trace? And of course, did Suzuki possibly survive? Richmond Byers was born in 1899 to Dr. Leonard S. Byers and Martha Byers in Sealyville, Indiana, a small town located about 7 miles east of Terre Haute. The Byers family was well respected in the community, with Dr. Byers being a prominent local physician. Richmond was described as an expressive and adventurous 4-year-old boy. Sealyville in 1904 was a typical small Midwestern town with a close-knit community. It was common for children to play outdoors unsupervised as the sense of safety and trust within the community was high. On Sunday, May 29, 1904, Richmond spent the morning playing outside his family's home on Main Street. Richmond had been riding his tricycle in front of the house under the supervision of his mother, Martha. As the day progressed, Richmond became increasingly interested in a baseball game that was taking place at a nearby park. Baseball was a popular sport in the community, often drawing crowds for local matches. Richmond was drawn to the excitement of the game. Around midday, he approached his mother and asked for permission to walk to the park to watch the baseball game. This was not an unusual request, as Richmond had often attended such games before, and the park was within walking distance of their home. Martha, trusting in the safety of their community and her son's familiarity with the area, gave Richmond permission to go, but with clear instructions to return home before dinner time. Richmond set off for the park dressed in a red and white jacket and a black and green cap. Notably, he was barefoot, which was not uncommon for children in rural areas during warm weather. This would be the last time Martha Byers would see her son. As the afternoon continued and dinner approached, Martha began to grow concerned when Richmond did not return home as instructed. Initially, she assumed he might have lost track of time while enjoying the baseball game. However, as night began to fall, her worry intensified. Martha started by checking with neighbors, asking if anyone had seen Richmond. To her dismay, none of the neighbors reported seeing the boy return from the direction of the park. More alarmingly, when she asked people at the park, she discovered that Richmond had never arrived there to watch the game. By the time Dr. Byers returned home from work, the family was in complete despair. They immediately began organizing a search, reaching out to friends, neighbors, and local authorities for help. News of Richmond's disappearance spread quickly, and soon a large number of townspeople joined in the search efforts. The initial search focused on the route Richmond would have taken to the park, as well as the surrounding areas. Searchers combed through woods, fields, and along the banks of nearby creeks. They called out Richmond's name, hoping to hear a response, but their efforts yielded no results. As night fell, the search intensified. Lanterns and torches were brought out, and the community rallied together, determined to find the missing boy. The search expanded to include nearby farms, abandoned buildings, and even local mine shafts, which were common in the area due to the coal mining industry. The following day, as news of Richmond's disappearance spread to neighboring towns, workers from nearby communities joined the search efforts. The scale of the search was unprecedented for the small town of Sealyville. During this initial phase of the search, an elderly neighbor came forward with what would become the only significant lead in the case. She reported seeing Richmond walking with an unknown man near the railroad tracks on the afternoon of his disappearance. The neighbor described the man as wearing tattered clothing and having an unkempt appearance. She recalled overhearing a brief exchange between Richmond and the man, with the boy asking, "How did you get that black eye?" This sighting raised immediate concerns about the possibility of abduction. The description of the man as uncouth or gypsy-like reflected the prejudices of the time and led to increased scrutiny of transients and railroad workers in the area. Law enforcement officials and volunteers focused their efforts on identifying and locating this mysterious man, questioning anyone who fit the description or who had been seen in the vicinity of the railroad tracks. Despite extensive efforts, including searches of nearby railroad yards and questioning of transient workers, no concrete evidence was found to link any individual to Richmond's disappearance. The man described by the neighbor remained unidentified, and the lead eventually went cold. However, this sighting continued to influence the direction of the investigation, reinforcing the theory that Richmond may have been taken by a stranger. Given the proximity of the last sighting of Richmond to the railroad tracks, the possibility that he had been taken away by train became a central theory. Railroads were a vital part of transportation in the early 20th century, and trains passing through Sealyville connected to larger cities and distant locations. The idea that Richmond could have been abducted and transported far from Sealyville by train was both plausible and terrifying. Investigators focused on the railroad theory, conducting searches of trains and questioning railroad employees. They checked passenger lists and cargo manifests, looking for any clues that might indicate Richmond had been taken aboard a train. However, no definitive evidence emerged to support the theory. The vast network of railroads and the active nature of many railroad workers made it difficult to track potential suspects or trace Richmond's movements if he had indeed been taken by train. A significant development in the case occurred on July 3, 1908, when Thomas Snedeker found a dew-drenched envelope on the side of the road. Inside was a letter written in a child's handwriting which read, "I don't know my name, but I think my papa is a doctor and lives in Sealyville. We are going to Terre Haute. The people I am with watch me very closely. Whoever finds me, please hunt for me." This letter reignited hope for the Byers family and the community. Dr. Byers considered it the best clue he had received since Richmond's disappearance. The handwriting and the details in the letter suggested that it could have been written by Richmond, who by then would have been around 9 years old. The mention of a Dr. Father and the reference to Sealyville lent credibility to the possibility that Richmond was still alive and being held against his will. The letter prompted a renewed search effort in Terre Haute. Investigators and volunteers scoured the area looking for any signs of Richmond or the people mentioned in the letter. Despite the promising lead, the search yielded no results. The letter's authenticity remains a point for debate to this day. As time passed without any concrete evidence, various theories of abduction and foul play emerged. One prevalent theory was that Richmond had been kidnapped by a childless couple who wanted a child of their own. This theory was fueled by occasional reports of boys resembling Richmond being seen with adults in different parts of the country. Dr. Byers followed up on many of these reports, traveling to various states to investigate potential sightings. Each time, however, the boy in question turned out not to be Richmond. Another theory suggested that Richmond had been sold to a traveling circus or a group of itinerant performers. Circuses and traveling shows were common in the early 20th century, and the idea that a child could be taken and hidden within such a transient lifestyle was plausible. Investigators and volunteers checked with local and traveling circuses, but no evidence was found to support this theory. More sinister theories of foul play also surfaced. Some speculated that Richmond might have fallen victim to a violent crime, possibly at the hands of the mysterious man seen with him. The lack of a body or any physical evidence made it difficult to pursue this theory, but it remained a grim possibility in the minds of investigators and the community. The high-profile nature of Richmond's disappearance and the extensive media coverage it received led to widespread public speculation and rumors. Some of these rumors were baseless and hurtful, adding to the emotional burden on the Byers family. One particularly damaging rumor suggested that Dr. Byers might have been involved in his son's disappearance, either intentionally hiding him or causing harm. This rumor was fueled by the lack of concrete evidence and the public's frustration with the case's lack of progress. Dr. Byers went to great lengths to dispel these rumors, allowing thorough searches of his home and property and cooperating fully with investigators. Despite his efforts, the rumors persisted, casting a shadow over the family's reputation and adding to their grief. In his relentless search for Richmond, Dr. Byers hired private detectives to supplement the efforts of local law enforcement. These detectives brought additional resources and expertise to the investigation, following up on leads and conducting independent inquiries. Additionally, rewards were offered up, but despite the new incentives, no results came through. This next entry is a short one revolving around some lost media. The Humpty Dumpty Circus is a significant piece of film history, recognized as one of the earliest examples of stop-motion animation. Created in 1908 by J. Stuart Blackton and Albert E. Smith of the Vitagraph Company, the film utilized toy figures to simulate a circus performance through frame-by-frame photography. Despite its fame, the film is considered lost, with no known surviving copies. Its innovative use of stop motion paved the way for future developments in the field. The Smithsonian Magazine highlights that while the exact release date and details of the film remain debated, its influence on animation is undeniable. The film's production date has been a topic of contention, with estimates ranging from 1898 to 1908. Again, the film is considered lost, with no known surviving copies. This status has led to various speculations and debates among film historians about its existence and impact. The lack of concrete evidence has fueled discussions about the film's role in the evolution of animation. Several sources have provided conflicting information, with some experts doubting the film's existence due to the lack of proper documentation. For this entry, I'll need to introduce two individuals, Heather Uffelman and Jeremy Rolfs. Heather was born in 1970 and raised in Knoxville, Tennessee. She was known for her vibrant personality, infectious smile, and dedication to her studies. As a senior at MTSU in 1992, Heather was pursuing a degree in mass communications with a focus on radio and television. Her friends and family described her as outgoing, compassionate, and always willing to lend a helping hand to those in need. She was an active member of the university's radio station, WMOT-FM, where she honed her skills in broadcasting and production. Jeremy Rolfs, also born in 1970, had a slightly different background. Originally from Chicago, Illinois, Jeremy had moved to Tennessee to pursue his education at MTSU. Like Heather, he was a senior in 1992, majoring in recording industry management. Jeremy had secured a part-time job in Nashville, working as a videotape editor for a music video company. His colleagues described him as diligent, detail-oriented, and always eager to learn about new advancements in audiovisual technology. A key element in this story is the Apple Quadra 950, the computer system that Jeremy was tasked with selling. Released in 1992, the Quadra 950 was a high-end Macintosh computer. It was primarily designed for professional use in fields such as graphic design, video editing, and scientific computing. The retail price for a fully equipped Quadra 950 could easily exceed $30K. In October 1992, Jeremy ran the computer through a classified ad. This was a common practice at the time for selling high-value items, particularly in specialized markets. The ad was likely placed in local newspapers and possibly in industry-specific publications that catered to professionals in fields like graphic design and video production. The decision to sell the equipment through a classified ad rather than through more official channels was not unusual for the time. The internet was still in its infancy and online marketplaces were not yet common. Classified ads in print media remained a primary method for connecting buyers and sellers of particular equipment. On October 7th, Jeremy received a response to the classified ad from a man identifying himself as Tom Johnson. This initial contact marked the beginning of a series of events that would ultimately lead to tragedy. Johnson claimed to be a freelance computer programmer and database consultant. The interaction between Jeremy and Johnson in these early stages appeared normal. As someone familiar with technology and working in a related field, Jeremy likely felt comfortable discussing the technical aspects of the Quadra 950 with Johnson. During their phone conversation, Johnson requested a demonstration of the Quadra 950's capabilities. Jeremy agreed to this demonstration, which was scheduled to take place at Jeremy's office in Nashville. Eyewitness accounts from this meeting provide some insight into Tom Johnson's appearance and demeanor. He was described as a man in his late 20s or early 30s. His manner was reportedly confident and knowledgeable, further reinforcing his credibility as a potential buyer. Johnson's ability to discuss the technical aspects of the computer and its applications in programming and database management would have been crucial in establishing trust with Jeremy. This technical knowledge, combined with his professional demeanor, likely dispelled any initial suspicions Jeremy might have had about the transaction. During the demonstration meeting, Johnson and Jeremy discussed the price of the system. The agreed-upon price was $31,000. After agreeing on the price, Johnson and Jeremy needed to arrange the details of the actual exchange. It was during this phase of their interaction that the plans took an unexpected turn. Initially, Johnson suggested that the transaction be completed at his office in Marietta, Georgia. Despite the unusual request, Jeremy apparently felt comfortable enough with Johnson to agree to this arrangement. As the date of the exchange approached, Johnson made a significant change to the plans. He contacted Jeremy and suggested that instead of meeting at his office, they should meet at a local motel in Marietta. Johnson provided several reasons for this change. He claimed that his office was located in an industrial park with complicated directions, which might be difficult for Jeremy to navigate. Obviously, meeting in a motel room for a high-value sale is inherently more dangerous than meeting in a professional office setting. However, Jeremy accepted this change. In the days leading up to October 24th, 1992, Jeremy and Johnson likely had more communications to finalize the details of their meeting. It was around this time when Heather came in. Jeremy invited her to accompany him on this trip, to which she agreed. It's a bit unclear how exactly the trio met at the motel, but it's believed that they either met up near the front desk or Jeremy and Heather were given a room number prior to the visit. Once inside the motel room, Jeremy and Heather set up the Quadra 950. At this point, neither Jeremy nor Heather suspected anything wrong. Then suddenly, the situation took a violent turn when Johnson revealed his true intentions. At some point during the setup or demonstration, Johnson brandished a gun. Johnson's decision to use a gun initially suggests that his plan involved intimidation and control. However, the subsequent events indicate a level of premeditated violence that goes beyond simple robbery. Johnson then transitioned from using a gun to a hammer for the attack, highlighting the brutality and personal nature of the violence that was to come. The exact sequence of events during the attack remains unclear, but it is known that both Jeremy and Heather were bludgeoned by Johnson. Jeremy sustained injuries to both his head and upper body. Johnson's attack on Heather was equally savage, with the intent to eliminate any witnesses and ensure that there were no survivors to identify him later. After the attack, Johnson quickly gathered the computer system. His primary objective at this point was to escape the scene before anyone could intervene or call for help. Jeremy, despite sustaining severe injuries, managed to survive the initial attack. His condition, however, was critical, and he was left incapacitated and in need of urgent medical attention. Heather, tragically, did not survive the attack, succumbing to the brutal injuries inflicted by Johnson. The discovery of the crime occurred when motel staff and guests noticed signs of distress and heard sounds coming from the room. The exact timing of the discovery is not well documented, but it would have been relatively soon after the attack. Given the severity of the injuries and the need for immediate medical intervention, emergency services were called to the scene and both Jeremy and Heather were transported to a nearby hospital. The Marietta Police Department took the lead on the case, working closely with Georgia state authorities. The initial focus of the investigation was on gathering physical evidence from the crime scene and interviewing potential witnesses. Forensic teams combed through the motel room where the attack took place. They collected DNA samples and any other trace evidence that could help identify the perpetrator. Investigators also gathered information on the stolen Quadra 950, looking for any unique identifiers or serial numbers that could be traced if the equipment resurfaced. As soon as Jeremy Rolfes was medically able to communicate, investigators conducted extensive interviews with him. Jeremy's description of the attacker became the basis for a composite sketch that was widely circulated in the media and among law enforcement agencies. One of the primary challenges for investigators was tracing the identity of Tom Johnson. This task was complicated by the fact that the name was likely an alias. Investigators pursued phone records, reached out to local tech companies, combed through motel records, and looked to see if similar classified ad listings were acted upon by other suspicious individuals. But after weeks and months of investigation, there was little to nothing to show for their efforts. A significant development in the case came in 1994 when Thomas Steeples, a Nashville man, was arrested for the brutal murders of another couple, Rob and Kelly Phillips, in a motel room. The similarities between this crime and the Uffelman and Rolfes case immediately caught the attention of investigators. Investigators delved deep into Steeples' background, looking for any connections to the Tom Johnson case. They examined his whereabouts on October 24, 1992, and looked for any evidence linking him to the stolen computer equipment. One intriguing lead was the discovery that both Steeples and Rolfes had lived in Chicago at some point, with their addresses in public directories being in close proximity. This coincidence raised questions about whether there might have been a prior connection between the two men. Despite the promising leads, definitively linking Steeples to the other case proved challenging. Steeples was said to be much too old to be Tom Johnson. Plus, there was no physical evidence from the Tom Johnson case to link to Steeples. Furthermore, Steeples actually died from consuming an excessive amount of substances in jail in 1995. Even after his death, suspicions and theories about his potential involvement persisted. Some investigators and members of the Uffelman family continued to believe that Steeples was the most likely perpetrator, citing the similarities in the crimes and the geographic connections. An intriguing aspect of the investigation was the focus on Jeremy Rolfes' behavior following the attack. Some investigators and family members of Heather Uffelman expressed concerns about Jeremy's actions. There were suggestions that Jeremy was not fully cooperative with the investigation. Additionally, Jeremy expressed frustration that the Marietta police would not show him a photo of Steeples, even though Steeples' image had been published in Tennessee newspapers. These were only a couple of the strange behaviors that led to some speculation about whether Jeremy might have known more about the crime than he initially revealed. However, it's important to note that trauma can cause individuals to behave in ways that might seem unusual to others, and there's no concrete evidence suggesting Jeremy's involvement in the crime. As years passed without a resolution, the case eventually transitioned into cold case status. The piri race map, an artifact from the early 16th century, continues to intrigue historians, cartographers, and enthusiasts alike. Discovered in 1929, this map is renowned for its detailed depiction of the world, which includes elements that have sparked various theories and speculations about ancient civilizations and geographical knowledge. The piri reis map was discovered during an extensive cataloging of the Topkapi Palace's library in Istanbul, Turkey. The palace, which was the primary residence of the Ottoman sultans for approximately 400 years, housed numerous manuscripts and artifacts. The discovery occurred when a group of historians and scholars commissioned by the Turkish government stumbled upon a bundle of maps and documents. Among these was a unique map that immediately drew attention due to its detailed and seemingly anachronistic geographical depictions. The map is drawn on a piece of gazelle-skin parchment, measuring about 87 centimeters by 63 centimeters. Despite its age, the map was remarkably well preserved, showing only minor signs of wear and fading. The material used for the map, gazelle skin, was a common medium for important documents during the Ottoman era due to its durability and fine texture, which allowed for precise and detailed illustrations. Piri Reis, born Haji Muhyiddin Piri ibn Haji Mehmed around 1465, was an Ottoman admiral and cartographer known for his contributions to naval warfare and cartography. He served under various Ottoman sultans, participating in numerous naval campaigns and expeditions. His extensive seafaring experience and access to diverse maritime sources significantly influenced his cartographic works. Piri Reis himself documented the sources he used to create his map. Inscriptions on the map reveal that he utilized a multitude of charts and maps, some of which he claimed dated back to the time of Alexander the Great and even earlier. He listed 8 Ptolemaic maps, 4 contemporary Portuguese maps, an Arabic map of India, and maps from Spanish and other European sources. Notably, Piri Reis mentioned that one of his sources was a map made by Christopher Columbus, which he acquired through captured Spanish ships. The discovery of the map in 1929 was significant for several reasons. First, it provided a unique glimpse into the level of cartographic knowledge and skill possessed by the Ottoman Empire in the early 16th century. The map's detailed and accurate representations of various regions challenged existing perceptions about the extent of geographical knowledge during that period. Second, the map's depiction of what some believe to be the Antarctic coast sparked debates and theories about ancient civilizations and their possible advanced geographical knowledge. The notion that such an accurate map could have been created without modern technology led to various speculations about the sources Piri Reis used and the true origins of the geographical information depicted. Finally, the map's annotations and detailed illustrations provided valuable insights into the historical and cultural context of the early 16th century. They reflected the interactions between different civilizations and the exchange of knowledge that occurred through trade, warfare, and exploration. The map thus became a crucial artifact for understanding the interconnectedness of the medieval and early modern world. Scholars and enthusiasts have debated its origins, the sources of its information, and the implications of its detailed coastlines, particularly the depiction of what some believe to be an ice-free Antarctica. The map shows a landmass at the southernmost part of the known world, which some theorists argue is the northern coast of Antarctica. This speculation arises from the landmass's placement and features that seem to align with modern maps of Antarctica without its ice cap. Charles Hapgood, a history professor, proposed that the map might depict Antarctica as it was before it became covered with ice. Hapgood's theory, detailed in his book Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, suggests that an ancient civilization, possibly predating known history, had advanced geographical knowledge and the ability to map the world accurately. He argued that the map makers might have had access to an ice-free Antarctica, which would imply that the map's sources were ancient and sophisticated beyond the understanding of known historical civilizations. Hapgood's theory gained some support from geologists who noted that certain features on the Piri Reis map resembled the subglacial topography of Antarctica as revealed by seismic surveys. However, critics argue that the resemblance is coincidental and that the landmass could be a misinterpretation of South America's southern coast. Specifically, many think that the supposed depiction of Antarctica is more likely a misinterpretation of South America. They suggest that the landmass shown at the bottom of the map is an exaggerated or distorted representation of South America's southern tip, extending further south than it actually does. This theory posits that Piri Reis, working with various sources of differing accuracy, might have conflated or misinterpreted these sources, leading to the inclusion of a non-existent landmass. Additionally, during the Renaissance, it was common for cartographers to depict hypothetical southern continents, often referred to as terra australis incognita. These depictions were based on the belief that a large southern landmass must exist to balance the known continents in the northern hemisphere. Such cartographic conventions might have influenced piri reis's representation. The idea that the piri reis map is evidence of an advanced ancient civilization is a popular yet controversial theory. Proponents argue that the map's accuracy and detail suggest it was based on knowledge far more advanced than that available in the early 16th century. Among the more fringe theories are those suggesting that the piri reis map's advanced knowledge could have been provided by extraterrestrial beings. These theories propose that aliens visited Earth in ancient times, imparting advanced geographical and astronomical knowledge to early human civilizations. Proponents of this view argue that the map's accuracy and the depiction of Antarctica without ice are beyond the capabilities of any known ancient civilization, implying extraterrestrial influence. The case of who put Bella in the wych elm began with the discovery of a woman's skeleton in a hollow tree in Hagley Wood, Worcestershire in 1943, and has since evolved into a web of theories involving espionage, witchcraft, and more. Despite numerous investigations and speculation, the true identity of the woman and the circumstances surrounding her death remain unresolved. On April 18, 1943, 4 teenage boys, Robert Hart, Thomas Willits, Bob Farmer, and Fred Payne, embarked on an adventure in Hagley Wood, located near the village of Hagley in Worcestershire, England. The boys, who were looking for bird nests, ventured into an area with trees, bushes, and undergrowth. During their exploration, Bob Farmer noticed an old wych elm tree that appeared particularly interesting due to its hollow trunk. Deciding to investigate, Farmer climbed up the tree and peered inside the hollow trunk. To his shock, he saw a skull staring back at him. Initially, he thought it might belong to an animal, but upon closer inspection, he noticed human features, including hair and teeth. Realizing the gravity of their discovery, the boys were initially hesitant to report it to the authorities, fearing they might get into trouble for trespassing. After some time, the boys decided to replace the skull in the tree and leave the area. However, their discovery weighed heavily on them, and later that evening, they decided to report it. Thomas Willits, the youngest of the group, confided in his father about their find. Willits' father promptly notified the police, who then initiated an investigation. The following day, police officers arrived at Hagley Wood and began examining the site. They carefully extracted the remains from the tree, discovering an almost complete skeleton. Alongside the bones, they found a shoe, fragments of clothing, and a gold wedding ring. The skull notably had a piece of taffeta fabric stuffed inside its mouth, suggesting the possibility of asphyxiation as the cause of death. Dr. James Webster, a Home Office pathologist, conducted a detailed examination of the remains. He concluded that the skeleton belonged to a female approximately 35 years old, who had irregular teeth and dark brown hair. Dr. Webster estimated that the woman had been dead for at least 18 months, placing her death sometime around October 1941. One of the critical aspects of Dr. Webster's findings was that the woman must have been placed in the tree trunk soon after her death. The hollow of the tree was too narrow to accommodate a body once rigor mortis had set in, indicating that the body had been inserted while still relatively pliable. This detail suggested that the woman was either killed and placed in the tree immediately or placed there alive and subsequently died from asphyxiation or other causes. Following the forensic analysis, the police launched an extensive search for missing person reports that might match the description of the woman found in the wych elm. They scoured records from across the region, but despite their efforts, they could not find any conclusive matches. The lack of identification added to the mystery, as it seemed improbable that no one had reported a woman fitting this description missing during the wartime period. The mysterious phrase "who put Bella down the wych elm" began appearing in various locations in the West Midlands of England in 1944, about a year after the discovery of the skeleton. The first known instance of the graffiti was found on a wall in Upper Dean Street, Birmingham. The appearance of this cryptic message spurred new interest in the case, as it suggested that someone might know the identity of the woman found in the tree or possess information about the circumstances of her death. Following the initial appearance, similar messages began to appear in other parts of Birmingham and the West Midlands. The most common variation of the graffiti asked, "Who put Bella in the wych elm?" These messages were typically written in white chalk, adding to the eerie and mysterious nature of the case. The graffiti was not limited to a single site, but appeared sporadically on walls, buildings, and other surfaces over the next few years. One of the most compelling theories links Bella to wartime espionage activities. During World War II, the UK was a hotspot for espionage with numerous spies operating on both sides. This context provides a fertile ground for the theory that Bella was involved in espionage. In 1953, a woman named Una Mossop came forward with a story that added a new dimension to the case. She claimed that her husband, Jack Mossop, had been involved in a spy ring during the war. According to Una, Jack had confided in her about an incident where he and a Dutchman named Van Ralt had killed a woman known as Bella. Jack and Van Ralt had allegedly been drinking with Bella in a local pub when she became drunk and passed out. The two men decided to place her in the hollow of a wych elm to teach her a lesson. However, Bella never emerged from the tree, and it was presumed that she had died there. Una's story suggested that Bella was a spy or someone who had discovered too much about the espionage activities. Jack Mossop's deteriorating mental health and subsequent death in a mental hospital further fueled the theory, as he was reportedly haunted by nightmares of Bella's skull in the tree. While this account adds a dramatic narrative to the case, it is largely based on hearsay and lacks concrete evidence. Further support for the espionage theory comes from the story of Josef Jacobs, a German spy captured in England in 1941. Jacobs claimed that his lover, Clara Bauerle, was also a spy who might have been sent to England. Bauerle was a cabaret singer and actress, fitting the profile of someone who could move around inconspicuously. However, records show that Bauerle died in Berlin in 1942, which conflicts with the timeline of Bella's death. Despite these discrepancies, the espionage theory remains popular, particularly given the numerous covert operations during World War II. Another prominent theory suggests that Bella's death was related to witchcraft or occult practices. This theory gained traction due to the unusual manner in which her body was found and the area's historical association with witchcraft. In 1945, Margaret Murray, a well-known anthropologist and archaeologist, proposed that Bella's death was connected to a witchcraft ritual. Murray noted that one of Bella's hands was missing and had been found some distance away from the rest of her remains. She linked this to the occult practice of creating a hand of glory, an artifact believed to possess magical properties and made from the hand of a hanged man. Murray's theory suggested that Bella had been killed as part of a ritual and that her body was placed in the wych elm as part of this ceremony. The severing of the hand and the presence of the body in the tree's hollow could be interpreted as symbolic acts within this context. Hagley Wood, where Bella's body was discovered, has long been associated with local folklore and tales of witchcraft. The wych elm itself, with its deeply grooved bark and hollow trunk, adds to the eerie atmosphere. Some believe that the choice of the wych elm was deliberate, aligning with ancient practices of imprisoning spirits or performing rituals to prevent the dead from causing harm. A more straightforward theory is that Bella was the victim of a local crime, possibly related to personal vendettas or involvement with criminal activities. One possibility is that Bella was a local woman involved in a personal dispute that led to her murder. The taffeta found in her mouth suggests that she might have been suffocated, indicating a violent and personal crime. The lack of identification and the absence of any matching missing persons reports add to the mystery, as it seems unlikely that no one reported her disappearance. This has led to speculation that Bella was either a transient or someone whose disappearance went unnoticed by those who might have known her. Another theory posits that Bella might have been a sex worker or someone involved in the local underworld. During the war, many women turned to prostitution for survival, and disputes or violent encounters with clients or pimps were not uncommon. This theory suggests that Bella could have been killed by someone within this sphere, possibly due to a dispute over money or a betrayal. The clandestine nature of such activities might explain the lack of formal missing persons reports and the difficulty in identifying her. The waheela, a cryptid based on North American legends, is often described as a large, wolf-like creature believed to inhabit the remote regions of the Nahanni Valley in Canada's Northwest Territories and parts of Alaska. Descriptions often highlight its wide head, short ears, and thick, shaggy fur, which can be white, gray, or brown. Its physical build is notable for its muscular body, broad head, and larger paws compared to typical wolves. It stands approximately 3.5 to 4 feet tall at the shoulder, making it comparable in size to a bear in some reports. The origins of the waheela legend can be traced back to indigenous folklore. The native peoples of Alaska and the Northwest Territories have long told stories of a powerful, dangerous beast that roams the wilderness. These tales describe the waheela as a supernatural entity, often associated with decapitations and mysterious deaths. One of the earliest reported sightings by a European settler comes from Frank Graves, a young man from Philadelphia who encountered a massive wolf-like creature during an expedition in the Nahanni Valley in the 1960s. Graves described the creature as having a snow-white coat, long legs, and a flat head. Despite firing at the beast with his shotgun, it appeared unfazed and retreated into the woods. His indigenous guide later explained that the animal was not a wolf, but a rare, possibly supernatural creature known as the waheela. Modern reports of the waheela are sporadic but intriguing. Witnesses often describe encounters with a large, solitary animal that exhibits unusual behavior. For instance, a man known only as Paul W. reported seeing a gigantic white wolf in northern Ontario feeding on a moose carcass. He estimated the creature's weight at about 200 pounds and noted its unusually large spoor, measuring about 8 inches wide. Another notable account comes from Tex Ziegler, a pilot who claimed to have spotted enormous solitary wolf-like creatures during his flights across the Alaskan wilderness. These sightings contribute to the ongoing fascination with the waheela and the possibility that an undiscovered species may exist in these remote regions. For the sake of the entry, I'm just going to refer to this topic as SD. This entry focuses on a peculiar white dwarf star that has captured the interest of astronomers due to its extraordinary characteristics. Unlike typical white dwarfs, which primarily contain hydrogen and helium, SD exhibits a composition dominated by heavier elements such as oxygen, neon, magnesium, and silicon, while lacking hydrogen and helium. Discovered in data from the Sloan Digital Sky Survey, aka the sdss, this star presents a unique case for studying stellar evolution and the remnants of supernovae. The star's unusual spectrum was identified by Gustavo Enrique, an undergraduate physics student at Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul, under the guidance of Dr. S.O. Kepler. The leading theory for the formation of SD is that it is the remnant of a partial supernova. In this scenario, the star began to explode in a thermonuclear supernova, but the explosion halted partway through, leaving behind a significant portion of the white dwarf. This type of event, classified as a Type Ix supernova, is less energetic than typical Type Ia supernovae and can result in the ejection of the star from its binary system. Another intriguing aspect of SD is its high velocity. Data from the Hubble Space Telescope and the European Space Agency's Gaia satellite revealed that the star is traveling across the Milky Way at approximately 560,000 miles per hour. This rapid movement is unusual for white dwarfs and supports the idea that it was ejected by the force of an explosion. SD continues to challenge conventional models of stellar evolution and supernova mechanics, offering new insights into the many possible outcomes of cosmic explosions. The Markovian parallax denigrate is one of the internet's oldest and most perplexing mysteries, dating back to August 5th, 1996. This phenomenon involves a series of bizarre messages posted on Usenet, a precursor to modern internet forums. These messages, filled with seemingly random strings of words, have sparked numerous theories and debates over the years. Usenet was a lively platform in the 1990s where users could post messages to various news groups. It was here that the mysterious messages under the subject Markovian parallax denigrate first appeared. One of the messages read, "Markovian parallax denigrate 8104 8084 96 888 1994 45 49 93 89 1234. The content of these messages was nonsensical and lacked any coherent meaning, leading to widespread confusion and intrigue. The original message was posted from an email address associated with the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point, specifically from the account Susan_Lindauer at wharf.uwsp.edu. This detail later became a significant point of interest as it linked the mysterious messages to Susan Lindauer, a name that would become central to the mystery's narrative. Many users dismissed the messages as spam given the random nature of the text. Usenet was no stranger to spam, and administrators frequently dealt with such nuisances. However, some users were intrigued by the unusual structure and content of the messages. The inclusion of words like Markovian suggested a possible connection to Markov chains, a concept from probability theory used in computer science and linguistics. This hint led some to speculate that the messages were generated by an early form of a text generator or an experimental algorithm. The association with Susan Lindauer added a layer of complexity. Susan was later known for her controversial views and legal troubles related to her claims of being a CIA asset and her involvement in anti-war activism. In 2004, she was arrested and accused of acting as an unregistered agent for the Iraqi government, which only fueled further speculation about her possible involvement in the Markovian parallax denigrate postings. However, investigations revealed that the Susan connected to the Usenet postings was not the same Susan involved in the legal controversies. The email address belonged to a different Susan Lindauer, a student at the University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point. This discovery debunked the theory that the controversial activist was behind the messages but did little to clarify their true origin or purpose. Again, many believe that the messages were generated by an early text generator using Markov chains. The structured randomness of the messages supports this theory. A text generator using Markov chains would produce strings of words that, while not making logical sense, follow certain statistical patterns of language. This could explain the random yet somewhat structured nature of the messages, suggesting they were generated as part of an experiment or demonstration of the technology. Another popular theory is that the messages were encrypted communications, possibly used for covert operations or espionage. The Cold War era, which had ended just a few years before the messages appeared, was rife with espionage activities. Encryption techniques were widely used to secure communications, and the random strings in the Markovian parallax denigrate messages could potentially encode sensitive information. Supporters of this theory argue that the nonsensical nature of the messages might be a deliberate attempt to obscure their true meaning. Encrypted messages often appear random to those without the key to decipher them. Despite numerous attempts by cryptography enthusiasts to decode the messages, no one has succeeded, which only adds to the allure of this theory. A more lighthearted theory is that the messages were part of an elaborate internet prank or an early form of internet art. Usenet was known for its share of pranks and creative experiments, and the Markovian parallax denigrate messages could be an example of this. Some researchers believe that the messages were created simply to confuse and entertain. The randomness and the use of sophisticated sounding terms like Markovian could have been designed to intrigue and baffle those who came across them. The lack of any apparent purpose or follow-up messages supports the idea that this was a one-time stunt, meant to spark curiosity and discussion. The Wall Street bombing on September 16, 1920 remains one of the most significant and mysterious terrorist attacks in American history. Despite extensive investigations, the perpetrators were never identified and the case remains unsolved. The early 20th century was a period of significant social and political turmoil in the United States. The aftermath of World War I, the Red Scare, and growing labor unrest created an environment ripe for radical actions. Anarchist and communist groups, disillusioned by capitalism and the government, often resorted to violence to express their discontent. On September 16, 1920, New York City's Wall Street was bustling with its typical weekday activity. The financial district, home to the New York Stock Exchange and several major financial institutions, was the heart of American capitalism. The day began like any other, with brokers, clerks, and businessmen going about their daily routines. The weather was clear and the streets were filled with people heading to lunch or conducting business in the financial hub. At exactly 12:01 p.m., a massive explosion rocked Wall Street. A horse-drawn wagon parked in front of the J.P. Morgan & Co. building at 23 Wall Street detonated with immense force. The wagon was laden with 100 pounds of dynamite and 500 pounds of heavy cast iron sash weights, which acted as shrapnel, magnifying the explosion's deadly impact. The blast created utter chaos. Shrapnel and debris were hurled in all directions, causing instant destruction. The force of the explosion shattered windows up to a mile away, sending glass raining down on the streets. The air was filled with dust and smoke, obscuring vision and adding to the panic. The The explosion killed 38 people instantly. The victims were primarily employees such as clerks, stenographers, and messenger boys, who were caught in the open during their lunch break. Over 143 individuals were seriously injured, suffering from burns, lacerations, and the impact of flying debris. The injured included passers-by and those inside the surrounding buildings who were struck by shattered glass and fragments. The physical damage to the surrounding area was extensive. The JP Morgan building bore the brunt of the blast. Its stone facade was heavily scarred and parts of the interior were destroyed. The explosion caused approximately $2 million in property damage, equivalent to over $25 million today. In the immediate aftermath, thousands of New York City policemen, firefighters, and Red Cross nurses descended on Wall Street. Emergency responders worked tirelessly to tend to the wounded and recover the dead. Following the explosion, an extensive investigation was launched. The explosion site was littered with debris. Investigators meticulously collected items looking for clues that could identify the bomb maker or the materials used. The cast iron sash weights used as shrapnel were particularly noteworthy, as they indicated a high level of planning and intent to cause maximum casualties. Crucial pieces of evidence were circulars found in a nearby mailbox, signed by the American anarchist fighters. These leaflets demanded the release of political prisoners and threatened further violence, suggesting a politically motivated attack. The language and style of the leaflets were similar to those used in previous anarchist bombings, linking the Wall Street bombing to known radical groups. Investigators gathered testimonies from numerous witnesses who had been in the vicinity at the time of the explosion. These accounts provided details on the wagon's presence before the blast, and descriptions of potential suspects seen in the area. However, the chaos and confusion immediately following the explosion made it difficult to obtain clear and consistent statements. A significant person of interest was Mario Buda, an Italian anarchist and associate of the Gallianist group. Known for his expertise with explosives, Buda was considered a prime suspect. Historical accounts suggest he may have orchestrated the bombing as a retaliation for the arrest and trial of fellow anarchists Sacco and Vanzetti. Despite strong suspicions, concrete evidence linking Buda to the bombing was never found, and he managed to evade arrest. The Gallianists, led by Luigi Galliani, were notorious for their use of bombs and violent tactics. Galliani himself had been deported in 1919, but his followers continued their campaign of violence. The method of the Wall Street bombing, using a horse-drawn wagon filled with dynamite and shrapnel, matched the Gallianists' previous attacks, reinforcing this theory. Another intriguing lead was Edwin P. Fisher, a lawyer and tennis professional with a history of mental illness. Fisher had reportedly predicted a bombing on Wall Street, but he was in Canada at the time of the explosion. While his prediction was considered suspicious, no direct evidence linked him to the crime, and his alibi was solid. A less popular theory speculated that the bombing was an attempt to rob the sub-treasury building located nearby, where a large amount of gold was being transferred on the day of the attack. However, this theory did not hold much ground due to the lack of any direct evidence supporting it and the nature of the bombing itself, which seemed more politically motivated than profit-driven.